Welcome back, guys, to another video. This is Junior here. If you're interested in learning more about backend development, consider subscribing, guys, because I'll be dropping bangers each and every time with regards to backend development. And I'm bringing to you an Instagram backend development clone. And here is basically our database design with regards to our backend clone. So we'll be having a users table, post table, stories table, and saved table. User can have one or many of stories, saved, and posts, right? So this is basically a high level overview of our database design. So we are getting started with building our Instagram backend clone. Before we get started, pause the video, like, comment, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell because you do not want to miss out on the other builds that I'll be working on, right? So now what we're going to be doing today is we have this features that I've laid out for you guys. So we're going to be doing authentication. We'll be able to create posts. We'll be able to like and comment and create stories that will last 24 hours. But then I'm sure you guys can see that I didn't tick off saving posts and following and unfollowing. I did that deliberately because I would love to interact with you guys. So I will have this project on a repository. I'd like you guys to do this too. Create a pull request so that I can see, and I'll definitely merge it up, guys. So I just like to interact with you guys, and if you guys want, and then I'll create a video on these two parts. But then I believe it would be nice for us to interact via GitHub, so on and so forth, right? So now let's get started with regards to this thing. So what we want to do first is we want to create our tables for this thing. And before we get started, let me run you down on the technologies that we'll be using. We'll be using Node Express, TypeScript, and PostgreSQL, also MongoDB on top, right? And why didn't I also use GraphQL since Instagram uses GraphQL is because I do not want to lose a lot of people within this tutorial. I want to keep it as user friendly as possible. But then as we go on with other builds, definitely I'll add what we call somewhat similar like architecture with regards to what technologies each company is using, if that makes sense, right? So let's get started with regards to creating our tables. So now I'll call it model folder, and now here I'll just create a file called user.sql. So this SQL file will take the code that we're going to write and then run it on pg admin, right? So now what then we do is we'll say create table, and then we say users, right? And don't be scared about all these other files. This is just a base level file. There's really nothing here happening here in the server folder, which is starting your server, and then the rest is just ESLint and everything, just to keep the project consistent. Also for you guys that we're making pull requests, I have this ESLint and everything, so we can keep everything on the same level, right? And having the same kind of style of writing code, right? So here we want to create our users table, right? So now remember, with regards to our users, we need our username, and this username will give it a varchar, and then this will say 50. So here we're saying that this would be somewhat like it would be a string basically, or a text which will have 50 characters, right? And then we'll say that this is not null, and we'll say that this is our primary key, right? Because with regards to this, and we'll also have to say this is unique, because remember on Instagram you cannot have usernames that are the same. And then we'll have email, and then we'll say varchar, and then that will be 50, and then we'll say not now, and then also email should be unique. And then we'll have password. So password will also say varchar, but they want to give an allowance because we're going to be using bcrypt. We'll say 150, right? And password shouldn't be null. And then we come back here, we want to work with this full name. We want to have full name, and then within the full name we'll say varchar, and that we can say that it's 100, and then also shouldn't be null, right? And then we have a user's bio, which we say varchar, so I can give it a 50. I think also Instagram caps the how long your bio can be. I'm not really 100% sure. However, this is what we're gonna be doing. And then we'll say following. And then with regards to following, I'll say this is a text of array. Why am I doing this? Is because we want to keep here track of the username. So here I want to enter an array of usernames so that we can know that we do not need to duplicate what we call users following twice, so on and so forth. So this is just for us to know that, okay, if Junior followed Jane, and then if Junior is within this array, then Junior shouldn't be able to follow again, right? Hence we say text of array. And then now we want to also do the same thing with regards to followers, and that Junior cannot follow the same person 50,000 times, right? So this will be the SQL that we're going to be inserting into pgadmin. So excuse me, so I'll go into pgadmin and then try and run the SQL, right? So this should work. We shouldn't really encounter any problems as of now. So now with that running, and then I can come in here, go to this query editor, and then paste that SQL query, right? And then I don't know why my pgadmin has a bit of lag. Let's see. So my pgadmin is giving me some bit of problems here, guys. I don't know why. If it keeps on like this, we'll definitely, okay, there we go. So we have that query there, and then let's just run it. So right here within the messages, we should actually get a create table response. So as you can see below, it says waiting for query to complete. So let's see, why is it taking that much time? pgadmin shouldn't really take that much time. But then there we go, we get a create table message, right? So that means that it has been successfully created. So now let's go to the other table that we want to deal with. And what table is that? That is the posts table, right? So now let's start with let's go right there, and then we'll say post.sql, right? So now we come back here, and then within this file we write same, not same query, but then same kind of syntax, which is create table, and then we'll say posts. And then within that, what then do we want? We want the media of this thing, right? And the media is basically a user can post, a post can post maybe 5 pictures, right? So we want to give allowance to that. So we will say text of array, right? And then we'll say not now, right? And then we'll have a caption, because you know it's no Instagram post without a caption. So we'll say caption, which is a varchar. Let's give that person 50 and say not now, right? But then we can even give an allowance of 100, maybe for those that like to write poems and everything. So we'll say also author. So the author is basically the username, right, that we're gonna be saying. And then we'll say varchar, and that will be 50. And then we'll say references, and then we'll say users, and then what are we referencing? The username, right? And then this is just now creating a relationship for what we call this table, which is posts and author, not author and users, right? So now we also need likes, right? And also with regards to likes, we'll say text of array. Why are we doing this? Because a user can only like once. So when I keep track that, okay, if Junior liked, we'll search if Junior's username does pop up here. And then if it does pop up, then even though that user presses 1,000 number of times, it won't really work, right? And then we'll say comments, because we need comments. And then within comments, what then do we do? This should be a JSON, right? So why do we do that is because comments will have also person can reply to a comment, and also comments will have likes, right? So we want to have a structure whereby, say for example, it's a post, right? And then within that post, okay, so let's say this is someone's post. This is the object, and then here there's the comment section, right? And then this comment should be an array of objects, because here we'll keep track of who commented, is this post, how many likes does this comment have, does it have any replies, right? Hence we have this thing as JSON as our data type. And then also we say that we have an ID for this what we call for this post, and then we'll say big serial, and then we'll say primary key, and then not now. So this big serial will auto increment for us. So this will make our life easy with regards to handling this post ID and uniquely identify it, right? So we can just copy, do the same thing, copy this SQL command, and then I don't know, I'm pressing Control S and there's no saving, right? So now let's take that other SQL command out, and then we paste this new SQL query, right? And then let's run it right here in our users, right? So let's run it. Just checking that it's users, because if it was not users, then the relationship won't work, and we should get an error if it wasn't users, because remember we created a table called users. So now this should work just fine as far as I'm concerned. As you can see there by the message, it says create a table, and it says query returned successfully in 15 seconds, right? And then now what then we want to do is we also have saved posts, right? And that saved post, we want to create a table for that. We'll say saved post.sql, and then within this saved post.sql, so let's just kill other files so that we can have just like a clean space. So now we'll say here create table, and then the table is saved post, and then within that, what then do we want? We want the owner of this saved post, and then we'll say varchar, and remember the owner is basically the username, and then we'll say varchar 50 not null, and then we'll also add references, and then we'll say we're referencing the users table, whereby we want to reference the username column if I have that properly set out. And then we'll say the post that this user is trying to save, and then we'll say there's a big int, and then we references, and then we reference posts, right? I believe I have that as in plural form. Let's just make sure. So it is posts, right? So we want to reference that post, and then what are we referencing? The ID, because this ID is a big serial, and then we'll have that. And then this saved post, we also want to uniquely identify it, whereby we'll have its ID, and we'll say that this is a big serial, and then not null, and it is our primary key, right? So now we can take this SQL command, and then we can throw it up into pgadmin. So I just remove that other query and then paste this other one that I have here, right? And then we come back and then try and run this. Hopefully it works out, which it should. Let's run that. And then while that is, let's see, so query is trying to run. Let's see that work out. Right, and then we can see that worked out successfully, right? So now we can get started with regards to coding here, and then we'll get back to our stories, whereby our stories will be saved into MongoDB, right? So that is basically us trying to split our work, whereby Postgres will be handling a lot of heavy work with regards to the application, but then MongoDB will just handle stories and everything that will be staying temporarily within the database, right? So now let's come here, let's get started with regards to building this clone. So we have our tables all set up, and then what we want to do now, we want to set up a controller file, right? So we'll come in here, say controller, right? And then within this controller, you know my conversion, guys, I would say auth.controller.ts, because we're using TypeScript. So don't worry if you haven't worked with TypeScript. I will run you guys on each and every line that I will be writing. So here we're just going to go with best practices with regards to handling classes and everything, whereby we write an interface, so on and so forth, right? So basically an interface will be sort of like the rules at which a class or methods at which a class should have. Basically, that's what our interface will be instigating or enforcing to our class. So here I will say import. What we want to import is we have from express. Come on. From express, what then do we want? We want the request interface, and we want the response, right? And then what then we do next is we come here. We also want to import our pool that is from our database config. We go up and then we come to our database config. We get that pool. So let's just run through this pool file config. So here installed we have pg as our package. So you'll run npm I pg or yarn add pg, right? So let's just run that. We'll say npm I pg, or you'll say yarn add pg, depending on what package management you are using, right? So now with that said, what then we do is we export, we create a pool, new pool, and then we have the username, and then we have the host, which is localhost, the database which I have created, and the password, right? So all this are stored within our environment variables, and mind you, this will be different to what you guys are running, right? So with regards to the probably the database, I'm just using the default one, not something that not nothing fancy. I never created a user, and then also the password, right? So now with that said, that's what's happening within this config file, and really nothing much. And then now what then we do is we also have within this default file, we also have bcrypt installed. So you guys will also have bcrypt, so you should just say bcrypt. But then if you created or didn't use this base folder that I've provided for you, you'll run yarn add bcrypt, or you run npm I bcrypt, right? So I just have certain packages pre-installed, and then what then we do is we'll want to use gensalt, we want to use hash, and we will be using compare. So I'll be explaining each and everything that we're going to be using, guys, right? Excuse me. And then because we're going to be using assigning cookies, we'll definitely also need to have access to our .env, and we'll say .env, and then we need our config, right? So within that, we'll just say config invoke that function, right? So now we want to write basically an interface at which this will tell our class what methods to have, nothing more, nothing less, right? And then here we'll say interface, and then within this interface, it's a auth interface, right? So now this auth interface will just have three functions, right? It will have three functions, which is our sign up, and this sign up will take in a request, which is a type of request, and it will take in a response, which is a type of response, right? However, it will return back to us a promise, right? And this promise is a promise of response, right? Which has either any or a record being sent out, which this record can be a type of string or any, right? So this is basically the return type at which this sign up function will be returning. So I can just copy that, paste that here, because it is the same thing with regards to sign in, and then just change that to sign in, right? So now once we have that, what then do we do now? We'll now export class, and then we'll say auth controller, and then this controller should implement our auth interface, right? And we can see when we hover on top of this thing, it will say let's hover on top here, it will say type auth controller is missing the following properties: sign up and sign in, right? So now I can come in here, create this method, and then say sign up. Let's start with sign up, which will be of request, having the type of request, and then response, having the type of response, right? So now what then we want to do here is we'll be using body parser, right? So within our body parser, so this thing should be asynchronous, this function should be asynchronous. And then what then we'll get from our body parser is we'll get username. When a person is trying to log in, we'll get, not log in, but then create account, we'll get username, email, password, and we'll get the full name, we'll get the bio, and we'll get the profile that they're trying to let's not say profile from here. We'll get the bio. And do I have profile also? I don't think I added the profile. Did I add the profile here within that? Okay, so didn't add the profile, which is no problem, but then we'll definitely look into that. So now we have basically username, email, password, full name, and bio, right? And this is coming from request dot body, right? But then we need the profile, right? So let's just update our table. So we'll say profile, and then within this profile we'll say this is basically varchar, and then we don't know how long the image would be, the link, so we'll just give it allow and say 150, and then we'll say not now, right? So but then this changes a lot. What does it change within our database here that we have is, first things first, a lot of tables, two tables are dependent on the user, right? So we have to come here, drop drop table, and the table that we want to drop first is the saved post. We'll say saved post. Why? Because the saved post is also dependent on the post. So we first want to remove the one which is dependent on two tables, and then we want to now drop the posts because the post is dependent on the users, so we cannot drop the users without dropping the posts, right? And then that's where now I can come back here, finally drop the users table, and then recreate that. So it's really easy because we're just pasting these queries, so it's really nothing much here, guys, so not to worry. So we drop the users table, and then I hope everything is dropped properly, right? So now I can now remove this SQL query and then paste down our new query which has the profile, right? So I can now run that, and then we have that table being created, and then I can now recreate the post first, because remember I cannot use the saved posts without having the posts table. So I can just replace that like that, and then paste that, and then we should get everything running smoothly. And then we come back here, we get the saved post, we get that there, go to pg admin, we come back there, we come here, and then we paste that like that, and then we should run, everything should be back to normal, right? So now everything should be back to normal, right? But then now a few changes now arises with regards to how we're writing our code, right? So now here what we do is, because we also have this person sending in a file, right? And from Postman on a JSON, what is this? We cannot really attach what is this, an image or a media file. So here what we're going to be using is another pre-installed package, which is we'll say import, and we're going to be using Formidable, the most loved package by me. Formidable, if you guys been following my videos, you'll see that I love Formidable, and we have incoming form. So we'll say here const form, we create a new instance, say new, and then we'll say new incoming form, right? And then we'll say form.pass, so this thing will pass our request, and then it will potentially bring an error if there's any fields and files, right? So it will extract all fields and files. So within the fields, we're talking about textual content, so whereby we'll have our username, I'll say username, we'll have our password, we'll have our email, we'll have our full name, we'll have our bio, and what else can we have? So that's basically it, which is username, password, email, full name, and bio. So all this we destructure from fields, right? So we destructure from fields, and then within files we'll just come here, also destructure that, which would be profile, and then we'll destructure that from files, right? So that's what we expect from this thing, right? So now once we get there, what then do we want to do next, right? Is now we need to create, or we need to use another package that will help us to deal with this thing. What do I mean by this? So we'll be uploading our images to Cloudinary. So what then I'll do is I'll come back here, and then we go to Cloudinary. So we need our Cloudinary config. So I'll say Cloudinary. So this is the the third party that we'll be using to saving our media files, right? So let's come back here, and then we'll say to this thing we want to log in, and then what then we do is, if I remember those details, I'll say junior Hlongwane at protonmail.com. I believe that's it, and then write my password, right, and then sign in. Okay, that's the wrong password. Junior Hlongwane. I think Junior Hlongwane wanted protonmail. I think Junior Hlongwane wanted protonmail.com. Let me write password, and then let's sign in. Okay. So I'm not getting good feedback. Sign in with SSO. Let's use maybe SSO, which I believe should be Google related. No. So let me just open up with regards to this on my other computer. Yeah, which is signed in, and then get the details for you guys. Quick, easy. So let's see. Oh my goodness. Or maybe let's use another one that I'm pretty much junior web projects at gmail.com. Let me get it. I think these are the details that I'm seeing from this computer that I have here. Oh my goodness. Okay, so nothing is working here. So let's just get these details for you guys quick. Alright, so we'll go to Cloudinate. Why is nothing working? Don't say. I don't know why nothing is working, why all these details are not working. Because I don't want to be isn't the Google sign in? If it was Google sign in, like literally this would make my life easy. What other password could I have? I'm trying to think. Hopefully it doesn't block me out, because now I'm okay. Like, I think I've managed to get, so let's authenticate, check both. Okay, there's not a boat, hey. Boat, and then next, and then boat, and then verify, right? And then I think I managed to get the password. So now let's get our details for this thing, right? So this, we come back here, so it will send us to our console Cloudinate, so you can create an account. It's really not that much hard. You create an account with your email, and then you get your details, right? So here I'll come back here, so this is the username, and I'll put it here within my environment variables. So why is that env file not opening? Open that env file. So we'll say cloud underscore name, and then we paste that. Okay, let's copy that, and then let's paste that cloud underscore name. We copy that API key, API underscore key, and then we copy that API secret, right? So API underscore secret, right? So now those are the details that we need. And then what else? Now basically that's all, right? So now with that said, what then do we do next? So now I want to continue with this thing, right? So now we have our files and everything being parsed, or we are destructuring everything appropriately, right? So now before we get here, because we want to upload this profile to Cloudinate, and we know that we're going to be uploading other images when we get to post, right? So what I'll do is I'll write a function which will basically be something that I'll be reusing to upload files to, and then this will return back to me basically the URL. So this is just a good way of handling sort of like a project, so that you write a function that you're going to be reusing, right? Because we're going to reuse this function. So I'll just say file upload dot util dot ts. So this is just the conversion, guys. I'm sure you know by now my conversion style. So here basically what you want to run is you'll run npm Cloudinate, which is something that I already have, and we say yarn add Cloudinate, right? So now let's import Cloudinate. So I'll say import, and we'll say Cloudinate, cloudinary from cloudinary. And then what then we do next is we'll say const cloudinary is equals to, we want to use the v2 of cloudinary, so we want to use that v2, and then within this cloudinary we want to now give its configuration, right? And this configuration, basically you want to give it the cloud underscore name, which we already have within our config or .env. So remember, that means that we'll also need to import .env, and we need the config, right? So this is just a nice good way of working on a project, guys. Like, reusing functions is very, very good, so that we write once and then just forget about it. And then we'll say .env cloud name, we'll say cloud underscore name, and then we have API key, which is process.env .api underscore key, and then we have API underscore secret, which is process.env API underscore secret. Right, so that is our configuration, guys. So now we want to write our function. We'll say export const, say file upload, right? And this file upload should be an async what is this? Should be an asynchronous function, which will take in the file, and this file basically is going to be a string. And then what then we do here is we'll return back to the person, or the where this function will be called, will return back to us a promise, and this promise will say resolve, and we'll write that function, and then we now come say cloudinary with the caps, because remember the caps is the one which is using the v2, the small letter one we're just importing, right? Remember that. And I'll say cloudinary.uploader.upload, and then within there we give the file, and then here you can specify options like the folder, and then the folder here you can, so that you can see you guys thing, you'll say insta dash clone, right? And then here the next thing that we need to do, this thing will return back to us a callback, right? So which will have an error or results, right? And which is a function that we're writing. So now if we say that, we say if error, what then do we want to do? Right, we want to return back to this thing. We'll say return res dot status if there is any error that will be arising from this thing, right? So I'll say return to whoever that is writing this. We'll say return res.status, and the status of 500 that we failed to run this or upload, and then JSON, and then within this JSON we'll say MSG, we'll say failed to upload file, right? And then if this thing then works, what then do? We resolve, right? And then we'll resend the res.secure URL, right? Because we want the HTTPS, we do not want to be saving the HTTP, because it also has a URL which is the HTTP, but then we want the HTTPS, right? So this is the function which we'll be reusing many times within this application. So now what then we do is we'll come in here. So one thing that but Formidable has, which is a problem. So here I want to extract this folder, this file has a .path, but then here, as you can see, it's either this file is an array or it's just a single file, right? So I've looked 1,000 places, but then couldn't find a solution. But then the only solution was to flag that files as any, so that we'd avoid unnecessary errors. So we flag that file, the files object as any, right? Which is really something that you might not really want to at most cases, but then in this case, after like going through a lot of resources, but then couldn't find a solution, this is the temporary solution that I have for you guys right now. So what we want to do next is we want to go to get that utility. We'll say file upload.util, and then we get that, right? So now we come in here, we'll say const, and then now we want to upload the file. So we just dump the file into the function. How nice is that? So we'll come here and say profile underscore URL is equals to, and we'll say file upload, and then we'll drop the profile, say profile dot path. Right, so now let's just console log this now for now, and then we can see if this function that we wrote worked, and then we'll continue. So say profile dot URL. Right, and then we don't expect to get any response on our client when we run this. And let's just come here and return a response.status of 200.json, and then we return back to this thing, a profile.url. But then remember, this function should return a type of this. So for now, what then we do is I'll just have this like that, have that there, and then with that said, I'll just have this as a void, right? And then remember, we need to also create the other one, and the other one I'll also just have it as void for now, so that I can run a test for this one. So really nothing much here, just having this thing, and then have that as void, so that we can see if our file upload is working just fine. So I'll then come in here to my source, create another folder called routes, and then we'll say auth.routes.ts, and then we import from Express. We want to import this router, and then we come back here. We also want to import our controller. We come here, go up once, go to controller, auth.controller, and then we get that controller. So now what I'll then do is we want to create our router. We'll say router, and then we want to create our new controller instance. We'll also say controller is equals to new auth controller, right? And then we'll create our routers route, and we'll say router.post, and then we want to go to API/sign up, and then we'll request, and then we get the response as well, right? So I'll say controller.sign up, and then pass in the request and the response. So now let's export our router. There we go. And then we expose this router back into our main file, which is our entry point, this file, and then we'll say auth, and then we'll say routes from. We go up once, and then within the same directory we go to route, we go to that, and then we'll say server.use, and then we want to use auth routes. So now we've exposed this properly. So now let's run this server. Let's see. So I come in here, say yarn run dev, and then have that running, and then I'll open my Thunder client, which is something that I'll be using, which is an extension. I can now close all other files that I'm not interested in, and then we'll create a new request, right? And then within that we'll say HTTP localhost 5000 API/sign up, right? So we go to our body, and then within this body we go to form, and then let's just also write username, and this username will be junior, and then password. The password will be 1234567 8. Let's just give it 12345, and then we want also the bio, and then we'll say NODEJS dev, and then we'll come here, say full name, and then the full name is Junior Hlongwane. So finally we need our files, and then within our files I'll just take in any image that I find here, guys, to be honest. Let's go to pictures. I have screenshots, right? So screenshots is what I'll be using, and then let's grab, I don't know what the screenshots are, but then I'll just grab that screenshot, and then I'll say there's a profile, right? So now let's send this and make sure that there's a post request. We go there, say post, and then we send this, right? And then let's see what then we get. We got an empty response from this thing, we got an empty response. Why didn't we? Should have found our profile All right, so now what happened is, I think I understand what happened. So remember, this thing is an asynchronous function, right? We didn't await. So here, that's what we need to do, await this whole process to run. And remember, there's async, and that should be async on the top level, right? So now not this. So this is where I said that a bit of change would happen when we're using formidable, right? So now we come back here and then we await that, right? So but then if we're using the body parser to handle that, and then we would have had a different story to tell, right? Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. So we come back here and then send this request, and now you can see now this thing is now even taking a bit time because it has to upload. If there is any errors, they should come here in our console, which is a good thing. But then we don't get any errors. We actually get a response of the image URL. So let's copy this image URL. Let's see if we actually uploaded successfully. So I'll come back here. I don't need this anymore. Paste. Oh my goodness. Why then it seems as if my copy is really not working just fine. So I copy that. Hopefully now this copy worked. Can you guys see this thing is not, I'm even pressing this Control C, banging on this Control C. So we come back here and then, oh my goodness, why is this thing not copying, guys? Like, why is this thing not copying? Go to VS Code, copy this goddamn thing. So we copy that and then we come back here, paste that. Now it finally worked. I don't know why. So you can see now the copy had worked just fine. We get that image uploaded there. Right. So now the next thing that we want to do is, we know that now our image upload is doing just fine, right? So now what then we want to do is, remember, why is this Google Chrome now open? I think I opened that by mistake. So now that is done. Now I can just create a new user easily now, right? Because we have this user profile being uploaded, which was the first thing that we need to do before we save this user, because now the data that we have here is now proper. So now the first thing that we do is we first check if not username or not password, because remember all these things are required, right? And not email or not full name or not bio. What then do we do? Right, so we come back here. What then do we do? We'll come back here and return a response.status of 400.json, and we say to this person or to the client, all fields are required, right? And then we also want to add not profile. We say not profile, right? So now we'll say all fields are required, but then this if statement should be above the file upload. So let's take the file upload just down here, and then we bring that there, right? So now we first validated if everything is present, and if everything is not present, we return a response that we need those things, right? So now we come back here. We'll now create our query. We'll say const query. I just like creating everything like this, and then we'll say insert, right? And I want to insert into users, right? What then do we want to insert? We want to insert the username, the email, the password, the full name, bio, and profile. I believe these are exactly the names. I can just verify quick. I believe these are the naming conventions that I used here, which is username, email, password, full name, bio, profile, right, within E, right? And these are the things that are required when a user creates. As for the following and followers, those will follow through, right? So there's the query that will run, and then we're not done, we'll say values. So now we specify the values, and then we're just going to create placeholders, and we'll say $1 and then $2. This is representing the username. This place, the first place will be representing the username, the second one will be email, the third one would be password. There's Alt Z here, and the other one will be say $that, and then the other one would be $4 for the full name, and then $5 for the bio, and then $6 for this thing. So I believe it's actually 6. So 3, 6, right? So this will be these are the placeholders for these things. But then before we even run this query, we will first know that we want to hash the password. This is just a simple high level of security. But then if you guys want to learn about securing your Node.js applications, I'll have this in the description below, whereby you can check out my crash course that I'm also doing with regards to Node.js security. You do not want to miss that one. It's really, really informational. You guys will learn a lot. So first things first, we create a salt when using bcrypt, and I go over this thing on how we securely secure our application, right? And then we create a salt with a a round of 18, and then we'll say hashed password, and this hashed password is asynchronous, and we want to say await as well, and then we hash, right? And then the first things first, we want to pass in the password that we get, and then we pass in the salt rounds that we get, right? So this password, right? So there's another thing that is coming from bcrypt, not bcrypt, man, from Formidable, that this thing can either be a string or it can be what we call a string of array. So the same thing applies when we're using Formidable for this part. I'll just say this is any, because we know that this will be a string, but then haven't found a solution on bypassing such, right? So now what then we do next is we'll just do that for now. But then if I do find a proper solution, guys, instead of doing any's, then why are we using TypeScript? So if I do find a solution, definitely you guys will be the first people to know. Right. So now we have that hashing out properly. That should work. And then now we want to now run this query. So remember, we need a pool that we installed, not installed, but then imported. So now we'll come here and say pool dot query. We pass in the query that we've written. But then now to handle those placeholders, we create an array and then respect what we said here: username, email, password, full name, bio, profile. So that's what we're going to be doing. We'll say username, email, and then instead of password, we say hashed password, because we want the hashed password. And then we want to get the full name, and then we want to get the bio, and then we want to get the profile. And in the end, the profile, we send in the profile URL, because this is the URL of this user's profile, right? And then this will return back to us a promise. Will say .then, and if everything went well, what then we do is we'll return a response.status of 200 or 201 saying created .json, and then we'll send a message saying account created successfully, right? And then we'll then catch any trailing error, which will have an error, and then we'll return a response.status of 500.json. We pass in that error, right? So now this should create our account successfully, which is fine. So now let's try and run this thing. Let's see if we do get a user account being created. I believe my server should still be running, right? It is running. And then let's just clean that up. I don't know, whenever I'm developing on this Windows computer, I have a problem with my NodeMon that it normally doesn't pick up each and every saves. I don't know. It's very, very weird. So now, but then let's just create this account. Let's see. So we create that account. All fields are required. I'm getting all fields are required. Why is that hitting me with all fields are required? So now let's have this thing back to back. Let's see. So we have username that we write. We have password, and we have bio. Oh, I left email, right? So email was the last thing that I didn't add, right? So let's go back to our request. As you can see, there's no email, right? So we'll say email, and then we'll say junior@gmail.com, right? And then I send that. Now that request should run. Either we should get an error, or we should get something tangible, or that has worked, right? So any of the two is fine by us, because it's our job as developers to debug. I always say this: do not fear these bugs, guys. This is basically our job to debug and see if everything is running according to plan, right? So now let's see, and then we get an error. Oh my goodness. So what error is this coming from? Where is this coming from? Length. So we're getting a length problem here. And the length problem is highly likely that this is coming from our password. Is it? Let's see. Is this? First things first that I'll test out is the username. Not the username. Password. Let's just write it as 212 because we're not enforcing any security on our password. At this point, we just want to run basically a nice, good backend clone, not worrying about securities and all those things, right? So now let's see with regards to this thing. What could be the problem here? Because everything should run smoothly as far as I'm concerned. But then it's not a problem. So we're still getting the issue with regards to execute bind message code. What is code? So let's see something. So we get our URL basically. Let's go to our SQL users. Right, so we have username, which is 50, and we get also our email, which is 50, and we have also our password, which is 150, our full name, which is 100, and bio, which is 50, and obviously it won't be the following in the text, but in the profile, so it's 150. What else is giving us problems here? This is very weird. This is so weird. So let's see, let's give allowance to everything. Let's give them 150s. Let's see if we bypass this thing. 150, 150, 150, 150. I thought this problem is coming from these things, but then so now it brings us back to remembering that we cannot drop directly the users table without dropping the others that are dependent. So say drop table, saved posts, drop save post, and then run that, and then that should drop my save post. And then the next thing that I want to drop is my post, and remember post is S, the table, so we drop that post, and then that should drop my posts, I believe. There we go. And they want to drop users, that's the next thing, users, and then we'll rerun our SQL query to creating the users table. Right, so let's see why we're getting what we're getting. All right, so now the users table is dropped. So now let's cancel out this query, paste in our new query. Right, so we have this will be our new query. So let's run this, let's see, and then go back to our application, and then we go back here, and then kill the server, rerun the server, and then let's see what is basically the problem with this thing. Right, so you have the server running, and then we go back to our client, which is our Thunder client, and then all fingers crossed that everything works, and then we run that. Let's see. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. I just hope this works, guys. Like, I don't see any problem. I also didn't see any problem with regards to our last table and its constraints, but then we never know. We never know. Right, we're still getting the same problem. We're still getting the same problem. Let's see. Code error 08P01. Code error. So let's say, come back here. We'll say Postgres code error. Invalid format. So what invalid format is talking about? Postgres stop that, blah 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 blah. What invalid format is this thing talking about? Okay, so what I'll do is I'll come back here. I think I understand here what's happening. I think I might understand. So we'll come back here, and then within this profile, what I'll do is I'll run it as a text, right, and then save that, and then we'll come back to our pg admin, go to pg admin, and then in pg admin we'll drop table users. Oh my goodness, not me writing wrong things. So I'll say drop. Come on, Junior, why? It's like my fingers are not even want to type, don't even want to type right now. So say drop table, and then users, and then we have that semicolon, and then mind you 1 2 3, and then remove that R, right? And then it's users with only one R, we drop that table, and then we paste that. And if this is just that error whereby, oh my goodness, it would be a silly error, but I don't know why it wouldn't have allowed us to run that as a varchar. But then that's not the point right now. So now let's run this, create this new table one more time, create the table, right? And then I'll just kill the server just, and then go back to this thing, go to my Thunder client, and then rerun this thing. Let's see what happens. Right. Let's see what happens. Hopefully now everything runs smoothly. It should. It really should, so that we can get moving on. Because this is just a minor. It's not really something big. It's just a minor problem, guys. Oh my goodness. So say character varying versus text. Position 99. And it is the problem. The problem was coming through with regards to this thing. Why is it not allowing my URL? It's very weird. It is very weird. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just have this as, hopefully now I can just bypass this by giving that as that. Let's bypass that by giving that as that. Oh, why is it rejecting my URL? Oh, why is it rejecting my URL? So let's see. Postgres. Why is it rejecting my URL? Very weird. So let's say Postgres varchar rejecting URL. I don't know why it's rejecting URL. Best data type for storing URL. So why is it rejecting my URL? I knew that was the part where it's rejecting this URL. So I can just, but then I use this. URLs can be greater than 255, and then blindly go for text, arrow fit, all URLs. But I just did right now. I personally see no reasons to store them as varchar, and then usually migration you can use a string data type, which I am not using migrations, right? But then is there, so I can just, I thought there is a string like that. I thought there is a data type like this, if I'm not mistaken. So, but then at this point, since it's allowed, it's not, I thought there is something like this. So let's just write 300, let's see, right? I knew that the problem was coming from my, what was this? Profile. That is something that I was very certain of. But then why is it not giving me those problems? Really doesn't make sense, because that URL is not long than, it's not long than what we call 150. Is it longer than 150? I doubt it. I really doubt. So I'll say drop table you use this, and then we run that. That should drop my table. There we go. And then let's just paste this new query, because I'm pretty much sure the string data type is not something valid. Might be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. Comment down below if I'm wrong. I'm not a SQL expert, so I might be wrong. So come in here, and then we run that, and then go to our Thunder client. Let's see, because we have everything running smooth in terms of like business logic. Now it's just a matter of saving this thing into our database, and not this thing rejecting our profile. let's see what happens now. Let's see what happens now. So this should work. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's just test it out. I believe this profile is the one that is giving us problems. Let me just prove myself wrong by testing this out. Or prove yeah, so just drop table, and then users, right? I believe that is the main reason. Drop table, and then also we'll just have to adjust there by our business logic, and then we'll run that. Syntax error. Oh yeah, so I just have to remove that comma there by the followers, and then rerun this thing. Right, so that should work. So now the next thing that we want to do is we want to adjust this. We'll say profile, we'll remove that, and then we'll remove the last one. Oh my goodness, I think the problem that was coming here is from here, guys. I have 1 2 3 4 5 again. I think that is the problem. I keep thinking that is the problem. So let's just bring back our profile because I didn't want to remove this profile, to be honest. Let's bring it back 150. It doesn't make sense, guys. Like this thing having failed with a varchar of 150 really does make sense, and all those things are just absurd. Having all those things is 150. Let's bring it back to 50, back to where they were. It was really absurd values, right? So the issue there was that I high-key believe that was the issue, to be honest with you guys. I really believe that was the issue. So let's drop this table. I'm sure you guys might have seen that and commenting down below as well if you guys saw that. So we'll say drop table users, and then 1 2, remove the W, and then we can run this. And then now this should work, guys. If this doesn't work now, then I believe then the problem should be somewhere within the profile. I'm still really certain that the issue, it's still by the profile. I don't know. I have a hunch that it's still by the profile. So we bring back our normal values, and then let's run this create table, right? And then we come back here, and then we should have this rerunning. It's fine. And then we come here, send a new request. Let's wait for the server to run. There we go. So now let's run this. And then let's see, guys. I believe now everything should work, because here I don't know why I accidentally wrote 5 like twice, and then yeah, I think that was the problem. Let's see if that was the problem actually. So we run this one, and then let's see, we should get a response of 200 right now. Really, we should get a response of 200. There we go. So the problem was there, guys. We had our placeholders as 5 5, and it should be 5 6, because remember 1 2 3 4 5 6. So that was just a minor problem, and those are the things that you see on memes whereby a coder has 3 hours coding and it was just a semicolon. So yeah, those are one of those things. So but then we're not forgetting, guys, our sign in method. So now we come back here to our sign in method. So what then do we expect from our sign in method, right? So we come in here, we'll say const. Within our sign in method, we do not expect a file. We just expect this user to send an email and password. So now what then can we do with that said, right? So we come here within our sign in, and then we'll say const, and then we'll just destructure basically our email and password, and we'll say this is coming from a request dot body. So but then let's define our request, which will be passed in this function. We'll say request and then response, like that, right? So now what we do next is now we come in here and say if not email or not password. What then do? We return a response.status of 400.json, and we say to this client all fields are required, right? And then the next thing that we do is first we want to check if this user does exist. We want to find this user, right? So now what we'll do is we'll write a query, and then we'll say select all from the users, and then we say where email is equal to, and then that placeholder 1, right? So now that should handle basically our query. And then what then we do is we then say const user is equal to, and we await, and we'll say pull, and we'll wrap this around bracket. We'll say pull dot query, and then we paste in that query and the email, which will separate, or which will replace that placeholder, and we say dot rows, right? And then because we async, because we await, we wanna async there, right? So now a good way of finding data types, let me help you guys, quick and easy for our functions, right? You can just have on top of here, and you see now we have this as our data, as our response, which we had back here. So now why did this now change to being a void method, right? Why did this one, if we can have on top of this one, I don't know if my VS Code IntelliSense wanna, yeah. So why we're having this as void is because remember we have a callback function which is asynchronous. Now this callback function is the one which is returning back to us basically the response that we want, and this one is returning nothing, right? So that's where now this one is void, it will stick as void, and then now we bring back this one to being its original return type, right? So now we want to get this user, and mind you that with PostgreSQL, it'll return back to us an array. We want to get index of 0, and we know that basically users will be unique or based on their email, so we know that only one document will be found. But then due to Postgres returning back an array of objects, we want to just do that. We want to get the rows of 0, right? And next thing we want to do is we want to check if not user, right? What then we do is we return a response.status of 404, which is not found, and we return a message and then saying account with this email does not exist, right? And then now what then we do is we want to check this password which this user gave us. Now if a user passes this stage, it means that the user is there and is a valid user. So we want to check this password to see if this is a proper password. So we'll say const, and then we'll say hashed password is equals to the user.password, because remember within the document we have user.password, and we'll say const is password valid, and then we'll say await, and we'll say compare, and then we want to compare the password which we gave with the hashed password, right? And then with that said, we want to check this will return back to us true. So if is not password valid, what then we do is we then return a response.status of 400.json, and then we send a message saying password invalid, right? And then now if a user passes this check, it means that this user has given us a valid email, a valid password. So we want to create a token payload, right? So the token underscore payload, whereby we'll have the username of this person, which will be user.username, and we want to have an email, right? So this might be things that we want to use in the future when the user authenticate the user. And then now we want to create a token. So say const token, and then we'll say sign, right? So this sign is coming from JSON Web Token, which is already pre-installed. So you also want to run yarn add JSON Web Token or npmi JSON Web Token, right? So now this is what you guys will run, and then I come in here and then I say JSON Web Token, and then within JSON Web Token I want sign, right? So now I come here and say sign, and this sign will take in the token payload, and then it will need also a secret, which will process.env.cookie underscore secret, right? And then also this thing we need to give it when it expires. So we'll say expires in, and then we'll say to this thing 365D, which is 365 days, right? And then now what we then do is I can just return a response.status of 200 post.json and then send back this token back to this user. We'll say token. Right. So now that should work just fine. So we now need to go to our routes and then add the sign in route. So we'll say router.post and then we say API / sign in and then we'll request and then response and then we'll say controller.sign in and then request response. Right. So now let's test this thing out. So I'll just change this sign in to sign up to sign in because we will just be extracting what we need basically. But then one more thing before we do that, remember that here on this thing we're extracting on the request body, right? So on the request body, that means that we're using body parser, right? So now what then we do is on this route, we'll have a middleware that will run first. So this body parser, you're not using it anyway. We're using it where we don't have media files. So we'll say body parser and then we'll say JSON. So that's where we want to use it, only where we have non-media data coming to us. So we'll say JSON and then we run that. So that will be our middleware, right? So now with that said, all these things might not be needed, so I can just kill them, even if I didn't kill them, but then just. So now I can just come in here and then go to our JSON, and then here I need to write email, and it's junior@gmail.com, and then password I believe is just 12. Right, let's just go back here. Yeah, it's just 12, right? Which is an unsecure password. You never want to have a person writing such a password. And we'll just say 12. Right. So now with that said, let's run this. Let's see if it works. So I run that, and then if we get any errors, just like last time, guys, we debug till we get what we want. All right. But then this should work just fine, hopefully. So now also within our console logs, we should be looking in our console log to see if we do have any errors that are arising, but then we really shouldn't. So, but then if they do, we'll handle those things. So then let's see what happens. So the most heavy work, hence we have a long request. I think you guys also saw those that watched my other tutorials, and also when we did with NODEJS security. bcrypt does take a good chunk of time here. So I think that is the heavy workload that is having the server just run. Okay, so we're getting at it. So, oh yeah, we didn't pass in the secret cookie, the secret key. So let's cancel this request. So remember that within our .env, we said that we are going to cookie_secret, right? But then we never really specified a cookie_secret within our environment variables. This is where I want to do that, and then here, who's gonna crack this cookie, guys? I dare you guys to crack this thing. I really dare you guys to crack this thing, so that our environment variable is also registered. I'll terminate that, and then it will register the new environment variable that we have there. So now I can come back, and then we run that. So now we should get something working just fine. Let's see. Right. So now we should get our token, and this token is something that I'll same time. I've never really used environment variables in Thunder client. It's something that I should look into, how to use this environment variables, because we would have easily added this token. And as you can see, we get back to us our token, right? So user is successfully logged in, and the token will last 365 days, right? So now let's get to the next thing that we want to do, that a user can create posts. Remember we dropped our table of posts. So let's just go back to PG client and bring that back, right? So I come in here and remove this and then paste that new one. So yeah, there's really nothing changing within our posts table, unless we have other problems that might arise, which I doubt. I don't know. So now within our posts, so we come back here, right? We want to handle this thing. So we come to that, we created our posts. So now let's create a controller. So which is a file which should be post.controller.ts, right? I really love this conversion, guys. I think it's something that you guys might look into as well. It really, really is nice. A nice conversion. So right now what we want to do is we want to first upload, we'll say import and we want to import certain few things. Remember, we want to write an interface. Always best practice to write interfaces. So we'll say request response, right? So first things first, what I want to do on this one, we'll be writing interface by interface so that we write one and then we see if it works, right? So we'll say interface, and then we'll say post, and then the first one will be create, and then this create one will be request, which is a request instance, and then that, not instance but an we're having that request interface. And because remember, we expect media file, we'll be using formidable, so we do then write this as void. And then the next thing is we expect to get not passwords, but then we'll get posts, so we'll get posts, and then this will be a request, and then a response, and then we'll say a response. Look at me mixing these things, guys. And then that will be request, right? So then this one, because we're just getting posts and everything, remember everything will be asynchronous, so this will bring back to us a promise, and the promise of response, and this should be any, and giving back to us a record of string, or that can be right. So now these are the two ones that we'll be writing for now, and then we'll be adding to our interface as we go on. So say export class post controller, and then implement that. So why did I write those two? So that when we can create, we can just write the query that will get the data. Nice and easy. Right, so implement post. All right, so first things first, create. So we'll say request, that response, that is coming from that, right? And then we need to import formidable, and then we'll say formidable, and then incoming form, right? So we create a new instance, new incoming form, and then form.parse request error files, all right? And then we'll say if there is any error, we want to handle that. So response.status of 200, not 200, but then 500.json, and then we send back that error, right? And then what then we want to do, first things first, is we want to basically get the user's token. So here it's something that we can do up here. So remember, here we'll get a token which will be request.token, right? But then remembering that there are two ways of here this request thing doesn't have a token, right? But then here we'll have a problem whereby we can create an interface and extend this request, but then we'll have a problem that when we push through via the route is having this interface of request. So for now, because I also haven't found a solution for this, I'll just write this as any. But then here, before we run this controller, a middleware will run whereby it will authenticate a user's JWT token, and then we get the token, right? And then from that said, we want to get our author, right? Because remember, author is coming from the username, and the token has a payload data which has username, right? Remember that when we signed in a user, that's basically happening there. So I can just write it there. We have that author, right? And then the next thing that we want to do is within our fields, right, we can destructure our caption, because we'll get a caption and this is coming from fields, right? And then the next thing that happens is we have to be careful that on files, right, a user can post maybe 10 pictures. You see on Instagram, a person can post more than one picture or more than one media file. So what then do we want to do with that, right? So we want to be able to upload multiple files. So what then do is we need to get the media count. We'll say const media underscore count, and this is equal to object.keys, because files is an object. So we'll say object.keys, we pass in files, and then we get the .length. So that's the first thing. Secondly, we want to get this keys actually of the file, so that if, say for example, it's image 1, when a client or when the front end is sending, they will cap those images as image 1, 2, 3, or image basically on the file name. So that's what we want to get. So we want to get this media keys, right? So we'll say media keys is equal to object.keys, and then we pass in the files. And then secondly, we want to have our URL. So we'll say const media underscore URLs is equal to, and then just an empty URL, right? And then now we want to create a loop whereby we want to loop through each and every image that we have using the media count. The media count will tell us how many we have, and we'll say I less than media count, and then I plus plus, right? And then what then we want to do is we want to get each and every individual file, and then how then do we do that? We'll say files, right? And then we want to index based on the media key, right? And we'll say media key, but then remember that media key is an array whereby we now index the specific index. So if it's image 1, we index image 1 of this media key and also extracting this file, if that makes sense, right? So let me just show you a quick example that will have an array of objects, and then let's say this is image 1, and then this is image 2, right? So now what then happens here is, here we have our media keys, which is an array, which will be having image 1, 2 as the array. So our media keys will be somewhat like image 1, image 2, right? And then here, what then we do is files. We can index these files, which is an object based on their keys. So now I can say files and then have that key at that particular index. So index 1 will be image 1, so we'll be indexing this basic image, right? So that's basically what's working here. So we want to index each and every and extract each and every file. So now with that said, what we can do now is within that, this thing, I can now get the path of this thing. So I can now say dot path. However, as you can see, we're getting this thing as red. So now I can wrap this thing around here, and then say this thing here, I can wrap this thing around. I created a bracket, you can say create a bracket there, and then say to this thing that this thing as a, not as a string, but then as a file. So this thing will be a file, which is a interface coming from Formidable. So we wrap this thing around, come on, and we say that this thing is a file. Hence now if I now dot, and then we can see properties of the file, which is the path that we're interested in, right? And which is actually a string, which remember our file upload utility that we wrote, that now is coming to you. So imagine us writing that logic up again. So that's why you write a function and then you reuse, right? So now we come here, say file upload, and then what I now can do is I now can say const file underscore URL is equal to, we await, and then once we await, we call in the file upload function, and then we pass in the file, right? And remember, once we await, we async. So now I async, and that should be fine. And then now what I need to do is I need to push on the media URLs this URL that I got. So media URLs.push, and then I push in the file URL, right? So now that should handle my file uploadings for one or many, right? So that should work just fine. So now what then we do is we now want to write our query, right? So that we can handle this, because we've uploaded, now we want to save, right? So now I come in here, say query, small letters, I don't have to big letters, query, and then we say insert into, and then remember it's posts with S, and then first things we're gonna insert the media, and then caption, and we want the author, right? And then remember values and $1. So right now we shouldn't make a mistake like last, and then $2, and then this should be $3. So right now we didn't make a mistake like last, and then now we come in here, we can run this query. This should work hopefully. So we'll say pool, and then pool automatically imported there. We say pool.query, and then we pass in the query, and then we need that placeholder array whereby we pass in the media URLs, and then we pass in, because we said the next thing is caption, we pass in the caption, and then we pass in the author, right? And then if everything runs successfully, we then return a response.status of 201.json, and then we say to this thing file post created, right? And then .catch, if there is an error, we return a response.status of 500.json, and then we return back to them that error, right? So now this should handle basically our upload. And then now the next thing that we want to do is we want to get this posts, right? So just control space, we should get that. That's the beauty of TypeScript. And we can now run that. We say request, and then that should be a request, a response, that should be a response, right? And then remember, this should be async. And then why is that async? Because automatically here we just will write a query, and then this query will be select. So here we want to specifically select this data, right? So what then do we do? Because remember that a post has a reference of a user, right? So here this means that we have two tables that we are dealing with, right? So here we're gonna use inner join, right? So what we're gonna say is we want the post.id because we want the post's ID. So I'll say posts ID. Remember it's posts. We want the post ID. We want the posts.media. I think I named it as media if I'm not mistaken. Let's go to posts. I named it as media. Right, so we say posts.media, and then we want the posts caption because we want the caption of the post. We say post.caption, and it should be a s posts, not to get silly errors, and we want posts dot likes, so we get the post likes, and we want the posts dot comments, and we want to get the comments. And then now that should be it with regards to the information that we need of posts, right? But then when we get posts, we want to get also who posted this thing. So that's why we also want to get the users.username, and then users, let's Alt Z so that we can wrap this thing around. So users.profile, we want to get the profile picture so that they can display there. Remember how Instagram is? There's the profile picture and the name. So say users.profile. So that should be enough information with regards to that. So now we say this is coming from posts, right? And then we say inner join, and I could have written join, should be the same thing. So we say inner join, and then we join users where we say on, right? And this is telling us where are we joining these users. We're joining these users on posts.author. Excuse me, we're joining that post.author whereby it's equal to users.username, right? So now this should be our query that we need. And then now what then we do is we now say const posts, right? Or we can say data is equal to we then say await, we say pool dot query, and then we pass in that query, right? And then we just want to get the rows of this thing, right? And here we're interested in getting those arrays of object because we want all the data that we have. And we say return that of 200 to JSON, and then we pass in that data there. Right, so now this should work just fine, but then if it doesn't, you know the drill, guys. You guys know the drill. So now we come to our routes, and then we say posts, or let's say post.routes.ts. Right, so I'll now import from Express. I want to import a router, and then I want to import that controller as well. Go there, controller, post controller, and then get that controller, right? So I'll say const router is equal to router, and then controller is equal to new post controller, right? So now say router.post, and then with an API /post, right? So that will be basically for creating the post. And then now for that said, I will say this will get the request and then the response, right? And then say controller dot create, and then request, response, right? And then we'll say router dot get, we want to get a post, and then we'll say request, and I don't want this thing to be imported, so I can just do that, really not necessary. And then response, it's just that when I tab, it just auto imports, just let it type. And then say controller dot get posts, that. But then one more important thing before we even test this thing out, because we'll get unnecessary errors, is remember that here within our controller, here when we upload, we are getting request.token, right? So we need to write a middleware that will first check the user's token, because you cannot create something if you're not logged in, right? So we come back here and then we create a folder called middlewares. So I'll come here, say middlewares, right? And then here I'll say authenticate.middleware.ts. So now with that said, what then do we want to do is we're going to be using Jwt's verify method, and we'll come here, say import from express. First things first, we'll import the request and a response and the next function, right? And then secondly, we want to import from JSON web token, we want to import verify. And then thirdly, what then we want to import is we need the config, because remember that will be verifying with a cookie secret, and then which only the server knows. So get that config, and then we invoke that function, right? But then remembering that since we're going to attach a request.token, this might really not be necessary, right? The request, but then we will need the response and the next function. So we'll say export const, and then we'll say authenticate, and then here this will be a request, which will be the request of that, and then we'll say response, and then we'll say that response, and then we'll say next, and then we pass in the next function, right? But then just to show you guys on how you could have extended this thing for those that are curious, right, for curiosity's sake. So how then we would do this is we would create our own interface, right? And this interface should be extending the base request. So if I now bring this thing back just for curiosity's sake, guys, so that I do not just come in here. So I'll say request. Come on. It's like a request like that, I believe. Oh yeah, it auto imported there, the top, the right. I didn't see that. Right. So now how then we would do this is I can now say to this thing interface, right? And I'll say custom request. Let's say custom request like that, and then we'll say extends, and it extends the request, right? And as it extends the request, what then we do is we can now attach another key value pair, which is a Jwt, so Jwt Payload, right? And this is basically an interface also from JSON web token. So now here, what then that means here, I can now come in here, paste in this as a custom request. It has all capabilities of a request, but then it will also have the token. So now if I come here, say request dot token, you can see now the token is there and the Jwt token. So we can keep it here, which won't give us any errors when we're dealing with this middlewares or this middleware file, right? So now within that said, what I can now do is I can now come say here, you want to get this thing, say const token, which we'll be getting from our headers. We'll say request.headers. So as you can see, there's capabilities of the normal base request, and the name that I like to give is XAuth token, right? And this XAuth token is basically, as you can see, it's either a string or which is coming from headers. It's either a string or URL. So I want to cast this as string, right? So that's where we now cast this as a string, right? And then now this thing should be a string, because the verify will only require a string. So now say verify token, and then here we want to get the process.env.cookie underscore secret, right? And with that said, this thing will basically return a callback of error or the decoded, which is basically the payload, right? And then if there is any error, what then I do is I return a response.status of 401.json, and then I say to this thing the message saying sign up or log in to continue, right? And if that passes, I want to attach to my request body the token, which is basically the decoded, right? So now after that, I can now come here, say next, call in the next function to push the user to the wanted or to the specified route. So this is where now I can import this middleware. Come here, import that middleware from, go up once, middlewares, and then authenticate.middlewares, right? And then we pass in that authenticate, and then we come in here, not to the get, but then to the post. So say authenticate, right? So we first authenticate this user, and then we go push them to uploading their file when they want to upload that. So let's come back here. We create a new request, and then this should be HTTP localhost, and then 5000/API/post, and this should be post request. So if I was to send this, oh yeah, I think my server is not yet right. Oh, it is running, but then I didn't expose my route, if that makes sense. So I come in here and then want to export default router, right? So now I can come back to my server.ts file, and they'll say import, and then from, go up once to routes, and then post.route. But then remember, it's not like that. Say post route, right? And then I can copy that, do that, and then post route, right? And then now that should have that working. And then I can now kill the server, just have a clean terminal. Just love me my clean terminals, right? So now let's run that, and then that is running. Go to our client, on the client, and then send that. We should get sign up or log in to continue, right? So let's open that sign in, whereby there's that JWT token that we're interested in. So I'll just copy this JWT token, and then come back here, copy that. Hopefully that copied, guys. So I go to my headers, and then I say x auth dash token, make sure the name is valid, and then paste that there. And you can see that I don't know why this thing doesn't copy, man, like when we in the standard client. Okay, that it copied now. So now what then we need to do is we need to add files, right? So we go to our form. So first things first, we need a caption, and then we'll say like, share, and subscribe, right? And then we need also our files, and then our files, let's even show that we can upload more than one. Let's add that, and we'll say this is image1. So this is basically a client would specify this logic, image2, right? Even if I said image3, wouldn't make a difference, right? So now we have those two files. I can just have that, it's fine. So let's send this, let's hope it works. If it doesn't, guys, you know the drill. You guys know the drill by now, that debugging is what we do best, right? So but then we hope that this will work just fine. So now let's send that, and then let's see if nothing is happening within our, okay, even our console, there's no issues, we're not getting any logs. So let's see if this really worked fine. As you can see, post created. Let's make sure. So let's change this to get, and then let's get the posts, right? So now let's send that request. We should get back our posts, right? So we're not getting any issues with regards to, okay, cool. So we're getting an issue here that post table is not there. So I guess I made a mistake here and said post instead of posts. So let's see where I made a mistake. So we say post.id, posts.media, posts.caption, .likes, .comments. Here it should be posts.comments, and users profile, and from posts, right? And then that should be fine now. So let's kill the server. I just like a clean terminal, guys. I know NodeMon is doing the job for me. And some of you might argue, why am I doing this? Why don't I just use my hands as well? So as you can see, this post is now created with our media, having those two files as a URL, the caption, like, share, and subscribe. I think you guys should do what this caption is saying, eh? It's a smart idea. And you can see the username, which is Junior, and the user's profile, right? And then the ID of that post. As you can see, everything is working just fine. Our post is created and we can get our post. So now what we want to do is, okay, now a post should be able to be likable and people should be able to comment on the post and people should be able to reply to that comment, right? So now this might get a bit tricky, I guess. I don't know. Let's see if it does. So now we come in here, right? So we want to be able to like, right? So now I will say to this thing, and then we want to go to our interface and then say like, right? And this thing will say, let me just copy this get post, and then I'll say like. So as I told you guys, we'll be adding one by one so that we don't have all these things and get unnecessary errors. So now I can control space, and then we'll add the next one as we progress. So I'll say this is my request handler. But then why isn't that something that I'll add as my request handler? Because remember, we'll be getting the token. So that's where I'll say this is any, and then the response. So the same thing as when we created a post, is the same reason with regards to this. And then this should be an asynchronous function, because same time we'll be getting, I will be trying to request for the post which this person is trying to like. So now we'll say token is equals to request.token. And then we want to get the username of this person, right, who's trying to like. Say username is equal to request dot not request, man, we'll say token token dot username, right? So we're trying to get the username of the person, and then we also want to get the post ID which this person is trying to like. So we'll say const and then post underscore ID is equals to request dot params dot ID, right? So now what then we want to do is we'll come back here. So now we'll query for this post. So we'll say let query is equal to, and then we'll say select all, and then we'll say from posts, and then where posts dot ID is equal to, and then we have a placeholder for that, right? And then now we'll use that will say get the post, or say get data, and then is equal to, and they'll say await pool dot query, and then we pass in that query, and then within this query we'll replace those placeholders. We'll say post ID, and then we want to get the rows, and remembering that this will just bring back one. And due to MongoDB, why am I thinking of MongoDB? Due to Postgres returning an array of objects, we want to index the first element, right? So now with that said, I can now come in here, and then now first things first is we want to check if this post or this post has any likes, because if it doesn't have any like, we can just randomly add the person who is liking without even checking or validating the information that is being passed to us, right? So now I'm just putting this thing, right? So now what then we do is we'll then run a query, not a query, but then a conditional to check if this thing has any likes currently. And if it does, then we'll do something else. So first things first, we'll say if not data dot likes, right? So it means that there's no likes. What then we do is we come in here, and then we'll say const likes is equal to the username, right? Because remember, it's an array, and we just want to add the username. We know that the username is unique, right? So we just want to add that, and then we'll say query, and this is why I had this as a let, because I'm gonna be changing this query tons and tons of times. So now we come in here, we'll say update, and then we just want to update posts, and then we say set, and then we want to set likes equal to, and then we say $1, and then we say where, and then posts dot ID is equal to, and then we say $2, right, for those placeholders. and then I can now say pull dot query is that, and then we say query, and then we pass in those placeholders, right? So what is the first thing that we want to set is the likes, and then the post ID, right? And then now if this runs successfully, we can now say dot then, and then if this do run successfully, we return a response.status of 200.json, and then we send a message saying liked post, right? And then dot catch, and then if there's a problem with that, we return a response.status of 500.json, and we pass in that error, right? So that's when a post doesn't have any likes. But then else, if this thing has likes, right? What then do we say else if data? We say else if not data, because remember likes is an array of usernames, right? So we say if not data dot likes dot include. So this is some JavaScript knowledge. So this will return true if this value is not included. And who's this value? Is the username. So if this username is not included, but then the likes has some bit of data, right? What then do we want to do? We know that, okay, this person that has not liked this thing. So we'll now update our likes, right? And then first things first, we'll now take in the likes. We use the spread operator to take in the likes that we currently have, and then we also add the user name, right, or add the new user that is liking, and then we rewrite the query. So basically it's the same query as this one. There really isn't nothing different. So I can just copy from here. It's really nothing different. So I can copy that and then just paste that, right? So that's, if I were to explain, is first things first, we check if there's no likes, and then we just add the user. And then secondly, we check if the user is not included within the likes array. If the person is not, and then we use the spread operator to basically making a copy. We take the likes which are there and then also add with the username, and then we run the same query of updating. But then now, if then this user was included, it means that this else if statement won't pass, and then that's where we have this else statement, right? That means that the user is already liked. So now I can now come in here, because this is not a problem, guys. It's not really an error. So I can return a response to 200 because it's not really an error as far as I'm concerned. And then I can just say to this person, post already liked, right? So in my eyes, I don't think it's really an error that would return 400. So we can just keep it like that, right? So now the next thing that we want to do is we want to be able to comment to our posts. First things first, let's test out our likes and see that they're working accordingly. So now I can now come and say router dot get, I believe should be a get, because we're not getting any data. So API /post dash like, and then we'll say request response, and then controller dot like, and then pass in the request response, remembering that we need to authenticate this user first so that we can get their username, right? And also it doesn't make it, no one can like without an Instagram, you don't like without logging in, right? So now let's go back to our Thunder client. Let's go to our post. Let's deal with this one. It's fine. Which one? The one that already has a token here. So I can now come back here and then say API post dash like, and then change this to being, we have that as a get request, but then we also have to specify, which I something that I forgot in the params, dollar, not dollar, but then colon ID, because remember we said that we're getting the post ID from our params, which we specified that as an ID. So we now have to say colon and then ID, right? So now that's something that we have to specify, and you can see the ID is only one because we have one post. And then let's just send this. Let's see if that works out. So you can see like post, right? So that was successful. So let's just remove this and then let's send that. We can see now we have likes from Junior. We have a like from Junior. So now if I were to return back this like and then one, let me try and like again, and then we should get already liked from this thing, right? So hopefully with this thing, it's giving us an error, and it should be dot includes right? Not include. That was just a mistake by me. So that was just a minor slip up by me. So now I can come in here, go to post controller, and then it includes, if I'm not mistaken, if my JavaScript says me well, it includes. So I write that includes, and then run that server, and then server should start up just a second, and then go to that, and then run that, and then say post already liked. So one person can just like. So let's just try and sign up again so that we can see if when we sign up with a new user, so username, let's say this user is now Max, and then full name Max, and then username email max@gmail. The rest can be the same. So let's sign up, and then we'll try and like with this one, with this new account that we created, and then this should also now add a new like from Max. So this is just for us to make sure that everything is working just fine. It's not just working for one user, so on and so forth, if that makes sense. So we want to test out that includes function, but then by now we see that that includes function work because it then pushed us to the else statement. So we're not getting any errors within our console. So we believe that everything is still running smoothly, no problem. The profiles and everything, we don't care. So account created successfully. And then with that said, I can come back here to our sign in. Let's go to our sign in. And then within this sign in, we go to not headers, but then our body. We want to change the email to Max. And then that should do. Let's sign in. We should get max@gmail. Let's see. Why is it giving me? Oh yeah. Let's come to the form. Okay, let's just see, guys. Let's just get our token, and then we'll replace the other one, the token that we have there, with Max's token, so that we can see that Max is getting added. Right. So we get our new token for Max, and then I can just really hard pressing this Control C because it seems as if this done the client, or maybe it's my computer. So we go to post like, and then want to replace the header because this is having token of junior. So let's like this post. So post liked. As you can see, the post is liked. So let's get this post and then see if let's just do that, and then we should see Max and Junior. Right. So now that is working just fine. If I paste that, we should get that post already liked. So a person cannot like twice. Right. So now the next thing that we want to do is we want to be able to comment to this post, right? Comment and then reply. So I come in here to my controller, post controller, and then we want to go to our interface. As I told you, we'll be adding one by one, right? Because we don't want to be adding everything at one go, right? So we'll come in here and then paste that. But then now this comment is a promise of void, right? So that's basically this one. So we'll say promise of a void, right? So that is our comment. Make sure that we write that as comment. There we go. And as you can see now, automatically it sees that, okay, there's one method that is missing. So we're trying to avoid writing and being anxious of writing methods which we're not ready to write. So we get our request, and the same thing, because request will be getting the token, we need to get who's commenting, so we'll keep it as any, and then response is the one that we'll keep as that. And then we will say this function is asynchronous because same time we'll be getting the data of the post which this person is trying to comment to. So const token, first get the token is request dot token, and then we get the username of this person, which is the token dot username. And then the second thing is, because the comment is only throwing you, just there's no media files, it's just a textual thing, so we'll be using a body parser there, excuse me. So we parse that, we'll say comment, and then that is coming from request dot body. And then the next thing is post underscore ID, which this person will be commenting to, request.params.id. And then now, first things first, what we want to do is we want to get this post, right? So we'll say let query is equal to, and we'll say select all from posts where posts.id is equal to $1, right? And then now we will get that, and let's query for that. So we'll say const data is equals to, and then we await pool dot query, and then we pass in the query, and then we have that placeholder which is post underscore ID, and then we get the rows of 1, right? And then now, first things first, we do the same thing with regards to comments. That if there's no comment, right, we just same time add, because it means that but then from what I remember, a person can comment as many times as they want. From what I understand, a person can comment as many times as they want in that. So it's not necessarily, this is not necessary for us to manage these comments, making sure that only one person, it's not like that. Because here we can just push, but then on the other one, if there's comments, we want to make a new copy using the spread operator, and then so on and so forth, you guys will see. So here we'll say if the comments are not there, right, what then do we want to do? We'll create a new comment, say const new comment, new comment is equal to, and then that will be username. So we'll use the latest ES6 shorthand, and then we'll get the comment, and that comment is coming from comment there, and then we'll say likes of this thing is 0, and then we'll get the replies of that, and the replies will be an empty array. That's what we're going to be keeping that as, right? So this is the new comment structure that we're going to be adding, right? So that we can manage also the replies, so on and so forth, and the likes. And then now with that said, we'll say query of this thing is equal to, and then we'll say update, and then we'll say posts, and then we'll say set comment, and then the comment, and then we'll say comments is with an S, because remember within our SQL we have comments, not comment. And then we'll say $1, and then that is where posts.id is equal to, and then $2, right? And then we'll say pool.query, and then with that pool.query we pass in the query, and then we now say, because remember within PostgreSQL we cannot really add, as far as I'm concerned, this kind of object structure, right? So what we want to do is we want to JSON stringify, we want to stringify this thing. So now we'll say to this thing JSON.stringify, and remember this is an array of comments, right? So we have that array, and then we pass in the new comment, and then the next argument basically is the post ID, which basically we said set comments, which is $1. So this is the $1 placeholder which is replacing, and this is the $2 replacement, right? And then if everything goes well, we'll say .then, and then this is going to be returning a response.status of 200, and then I can say .json, and then give a message saying comment made, right? And then we catch any trailing error, say error, and then we return a response.status of 500.json, and then we pass in that error, right? So now this should be the first part, right? So but then if there is a comment, we remember from what I know on Instagram, you can comment as many times as you want, right? So now there's an else statement, but then now the change is, yes, we'll have that comment, and also with likes, I think you only like once. That's one thing that I have to fix there, that a person can only like once with regards to all those things, right? A person can only like once, hence we would add that as an array and handle it the same way that we handled with regards to liking a post, right? So same thing, only like where you can like once. But then here when we're commenting, now we can create the same comment, we get the same comment structure, right? It's really not different with regards to the new comment which a person makes. That's it. But then now what makes it different is now we have to now come say updated comments is equal to, So first things first, we want to say to this thing, we'll spread operator. We get the previous comments that are there, the already comments that are there, and then add the new comment, right? By the now, we will make our life easy. We'll just stringify it here. We'll say json.stringify, and then we stringify it right away here, right? And then now what we can do is now we update our query variable, and the query is still the same thing, guys. We can literally just copy this. From here, the rest is the same. So I can now just copy that and then paste that there, right? Because we want to update the comments, but then now the only different thing is here is we'll change this to the updated comments, right? So now that should work just fine, hopefully. So now let's go to our route. Let's register that controller or this route. So we'll say router dot post and then API / post dash comment, and then remember we need the ID as well as a parameter because we're getting the post ID, and then we say request response and controller dot comment, right? The request response, right? So now this should work just fine, I guess. So I can now come in here, just copy this due to my laziness, come in here, create a new that, and then I'll say http local host 5000 and then / API that. We only have one post, right? Come in here, we need our headers xauth token, xauth token, and we need to get the token. Let's get the token. I believe I can get it from sign in. There we go. Let's copy that. Hardly pressing this Control-C to make sure that I really get it. I'm really tired of this thing not doing. So now we also want to go to our body. We go to that, and then we'll say comment, and then we'll say give this video a like. And then now with that said, what then we want to do next is we shouldn't forget that because we're using body parser here, because remember, non-media files or non-media routes whereby we expect something to be given to us, we'll use JSON that, and then we need to import that from body parser, right? And then we'll say from body parser we need to import that JSON, right? And then now I believe, as you can see, we even got an error there because I didn't import that, which is not a problem. So, but then, like I told you guys, I love me my clean terminals. So let's rerun that, and then let's go to our new request, and then we have that. I believe that should work. Let's run this, and then let's see if it works successfully. So we'll try and comment, and then we get an error. So it says cannot read property username of undefined, right? So now why are we getting that? That's a good one from this thing, is because we didn't run our middleware of authenticate, because here we first pass our body and then we need to authenticate to get that xauth token registered and verified. So we need to run that authenticate middleware, right? So now I can have that server running. So yeah, let's just keep it like that. It's fine. And then I run that. We can see post is comment is made. So I'll just open another terminal, not terminal. What am I saying? Terminal. And then yeah, I'm talking about this request thing. And then I'll just get, and then let's see if the comments are made. You can see the comments are made by Max. It gave this video a like. Let's make another comment. And then I will say comment below what clone you want to make. All right. And then let's make another comment, and then comment made. If I return the request, we can see there are 2 comments there. Bingo. So now we need to add one thing, which is a person can be able to reply to this comment, right? So we can see that this comment, we don't have IDs. So on this one, it might not be the best practice. We'll use their index as their IDs, right? So that's what we're going to be using, right? So now let's come in here, and then let's create that reply to or reply comment function, right? So we come in here and then we'll say a reply comment and then a request. Let me just copy because it's the same as comment, and then change the name, say reply comment, right? So now we come down here and then we want to add that final part, not reply comment, and then this is also any because we want to get who's replying, and then a response, which is that response, right? So now we async this function, async. So now where am I getting also this return types, you might wonder. So if you hover on top of this, you'd see that also there's a promise of void. So you can literally just come here and copy those things. This is the return types, and then add them to here so that you get valid return types, guys. So that's another way of getting this return types. So now what then I do now is same drill. We get the token, request dot token. We get the username, request dot not request, but then token dot user name. And then the next thing that we want to get is the post ID, because remember, we need to know the post at which the comment was made, and then we need to know the comment ID so that we can reply to it, if that makes sense. So we need to get the post ID, which is request.params.id, right? And then now we want to get const the comment IDX, which is the comment index. I'll just keep it as IDX, but we know that is the index, not necessarily the ID, but then best practice will be having that as an index. So we'll say IDX, right? And then the next thing is we'll also be running body pass on this one. So we'll get the reply, and this is coming from request.body, right? And then the first things first is we'll run a query. We'll say let to this thing. So let me think about this, because it's the same thing as comments, that we want to get this thing and just push to this thing, if that makes sense. So now what we want to do is we'll come in here. So I can say let, we want to get this thing, we'll say let query is equal to, so we'll say select all from posts, and we'll say where posts.id is equal to $1, right? And then we'll get that post, and then we'll say await pool.query, and then we pass in that query, and then that replacing those placeholders, and the placeholder that we're replacing is the post ID, right? And then remember, we get the rows 0, right? So now I think also if I had done something like this, because what I'm thinking is this might not have been the most efficient in handling this posts in terms of the first two parts. I don't know, what do you guys think? Did I need to check if comments are not there and then come in here and then do this, or should I have done something like that? I don't know. I think the most efficient could have been this, but then let's see. From your comments down below, comment down below on what you guys think that I should have done. That is most efficient way. So here, what I could have done, I think I should have say comments, right? Comments is equal to, and then here, since we have the post, we'll say posts, post dot comments, right? Because we want to get those comments, right? We make that, and then now we need to get because now we have the comments, we now need to extract the specific comment that we need, which is the ID, which is basically our index, right? So now we need to say comments of comment IDX, right? And then now we need to get the replies. We'll say replies, right? And then within the replies, what then do? We need to push this user, right? We'll say replies dot push, and then we need to push the new reply, which is basically the username and the reply message, right? So and then after that, what then we do is I can now say pull dot first things first, we need to write our new query, right? So we'll say query is equal to update, and then we'll say update posts, and then we'll say set and then we'll say comments, which is equal to, and then $1, and then where posts.id is equal to $2, and then I can now say pull.query, pass in that query, and then replace all those things. And then here, what I can do to this thing, I can now say JSON.stringify. I want to stringify the comments, and then also the post ID, replacing that. And then one thing that I then do is resolve this promise, and then return a response.status of 200.json, and then we say replied to comment, right? And then we catch any possible errors. We catch those possible errors, return a response, return response.status of 500.json, passing the error, right? So now that should reply to our comment. Let's see if we get that done. So, but the next thing that I want to do before we even test or expose this reply comment is also we can get a user specific comment, right? Not a comment, man. We can get a specific we can get a specific post. Remember, if say for example you click on a post and then you can see one individual post. So that's what I want to add, which is get post. Say get post by ID, because remember we can also get post by in each, like you can click on Instagram and get one individual post, not multiple posts, right? So that's one final thing that I want to add, and then we'll say get posts and then request, and then here we'll use the normal request instance, and then because we're not necessarily interested in if a person is authenticated. And then now what then I get is I can now async, and then we get the data. So first things first, we want to get the post underscore ID, and then we'll get this from request.params.id, and then we'll write our query. And you can see that when I'm going to write one query, I write it as const. When I know that I'll be writing more than one query, I write it as let. And that is something that I enforced on my ESLint, so that when you guys make pull requests for those two methods, those two functionalities, you guys will see that there's consistency, so that we work just nicely. So say select all from posts, and then where posts.id is equal to $1, and then I can now say const, and then I can say post is equal to, and then await pull.query, and then query, and then in brackets we pass in the ID, which is the post ID, and then .rows 0, right? And then return a response.status of 200.json, and then I pass in the post, right? So now another thing is, you can see that where am I getting this return type? This, guys, you can just literally come in here and post, and then make sure that all your return types are good and nice. So now let's expose this route, which is reply comment. So I'll say router dot post, and then /API, and then post dash reply dash comment, and then ID. And then I think the reply comment has many parameters that we have to throw in here. So let's go to reply comment. Let's see the params that we have to throw in. We have to throw ID and also IDX, right? So that's what we need to make sure of. And then I come in here colon IDX, and then a request, a response, and then controller dot reply comment, passing the request and the response. And remembering that we need to authenticate first the JSON. We want to body pass this thing and then authenticate, right? And the next one that we want to get is by ID. So I'll say router.get, and then /API /post, and then I can now say ID. Hopefully it won't clash with the above. I believe it won't. And then, but then if it does, we'll definitely resolve that. It's no problem. So say controller dot get post by ID, and then request, and then response. Right. So now that should work. But then you guys see that if you guys wanted me to use GraphQL and learn about GraphQL, we could have done this application in a way much more efficient way. But then let's just stick with this for now, so that I don't lose a lot of people. So now I can just come in here to my routes. I just want to copy this route. Very lazy to be typing. And then I'll just do that, and replace. So when I comment on the first comment, ID post is 1. And what we want to reply to, remember, what it expects from us is basically something called the reply. And then I will say, was this video good? This is basically our reply. Let's reply. Let's see if we get any errors. If we do, that's a good thing. We'll resolve those errors. So we got nothing. Let's see we get those things. Let's see within our comments, we got basically that replies like that. Right. So now that is working just fine. We can see this thing is working just as we expect it to, because we said that we want to comment to index of 1. So, but then if we wanted to comment to index of 0, because remember our index starts from 0 to infinity or n-1. So let's say, is this really working? Right. So that we make sure that everything is working just fine. A reply is made, and then if I come, why am I having this? Let's bring that up. And then let's bring that up as well. Let's bring this to the side. And then let's see, is this really working? You can see now for the index of 0, is this really working? We get that comment there, or reply comment. So now that is working fine. Let's get element. Let's get post by ID, not element. Let's get post by ID. So if we get post, you can see we're getting all posts. So now let's create another post. Obviously this won't work because we're getting just one. But then if I get by ID, it should only return back to us an object, one object. So as you can see, it returned back to us one object, not an array of objects, if that makes sense. But then just to make sure that you guys see this properly and are sure that I'm not just creating things, let's just create a new request. Right. And then we'll say HTTP localhost and then 5000 API post. This should be a post request. And then what then does this thing expect, by the way? Let's go back to our controller. Our controller will tell us what this thing expects. When we create a post, it expects caption and media files. All right. So I come in here. I don't want to save that new file. So I come here to my form body and then caption. And then we'll say happy coding, guys. And then create files. We want to add files. We'll just add 1, 2, let's add 3. Right. But then make sure that we give them names. Image 1, image 2, image 3. So now that should work. But then remember, it will say sign up or log in to continue. Let's get our token. I believe I can get one here. So I get that token. Right. And then we come here, we'll say x-auth-token, and then we paste that token. Now let's post this. Let's see if this works just fine. It should. We shouldn't get any problems because we've already seen that we can get our posts. Not get a post, but then create posts. Right. So now let's just run that, and then from there we now test out get post by ID so that we guys are certain that we get posts by ID properly. So now let's remove that. And then when I send this, we should get 2 posts, right? We have the first post, which is the ID of 2. And this is this one. It doesn't have any likes, no comments. And this one is ID of 1. So let's come in here. Let's get ID of 2. I come here. I get the one with ID of 2. I can now come in here, get the one of ID of 1. Bingo. So now we have that working just fine. Right. So now what we want to do is we want to deal with stories, guys. Remember, a person can make a story, but then the stories lasts only for 24 hours, right? So now what then do we do is we need to have cron job working that will be something that I believe the easiest to use. I don't know, right? So cron job is the one that we're gonna be using, and that's basically it. Nothing much, nothing fancy. But then here, this way now we introduce MongoDB, right? So I now come here, say MongoDB, go to our MongoDB, and then we can now come in here, go to npm cron. This is the one that we're going to be using. We're not going to be using the node cron. We're going to be using the cron one, right? And then from there, I will then log in using my email, and then this will be the final thing that we're going to be doing. But then I really would be nice for you guys to do the other features and then send in a pull request. So this is the one that we're going to be using, which is an npm cron. This is the one that we're going to be using. All right. So now if I come in here, I can now just so I won't even create a new database. I'll use the YouTube clone one. That will be the easiest, so that I do not waste time with regards to creating databases, because we'll be literally going through one and the same thing. And I believe for other projects, what I'll do is I will then pre-create other things, not pre-create other things, but then pre-create also databases and everything. Excuse me. So now what I'll do is come back there, and then project 0, right? So now with that said, what then I want to do is I want to get my connection stream. So we'll first add the database access, and then edit this user, it's fine, and then edit password auto generate copy, and then it's fine, just do that. And then we go to our .env, and then let's paste this for now there. Let's go back and we go to that. We need to get our connection stream right now, and then just connect everything seamlessly through. So say connect application, that there, and then we get that. Now what I want to do is I'll say Mongo dash, not dash, but the Mongo URI, paste that, and then have that like this, and then replace the password, and then replace the database name, which will be ig-clone. And then from there, what I want to do is then I just copy this node, this cron thing. This is what we're going to be using, like I said. So now we go back to our VS Code, and then I can just kill that file. Come on, kill this file. I'm not interested in it anymore. And then what we'll do is we'll now create a controller called story.controller.ts. And then I'll just paste this for now. So now one thing we want to do is, first things first, we want to create our story model, right? So now our story model, basically it will be very, very basic, nothing much, because this is why we're using MongoDB, because we just want to handle this thing and then automate and also delete this thing, lightweight things, right? So we'll say story.model.ts, right? So now with that said, I've already pre-installed Mongoose, so you guys can run yarn add Mongoose. I don't know why I didn't also do this new database, so on and so forth, but then for the next video, definitely gonna do that. So now say from Mongoose, we wanna have schema and model, right? And then now we wanna say const story schema is equals to new schema, and then from that we want the owner of this thing, which is a type of string, and then we'll say required true, right? Because we need to know that who created this thing, right? And then the next thing we want to know is the media data, so which is also a type of string, and then required as well true, right? So now we also, what we do is basically within our stories, right? Because obviously when you create a story, a media is not really required, right? A person can just add a text and then there's a background. So, but then with regards to us, since we're just doing a mini clone, but then we don't want to have now all these things, because Instagram is a big application, guys. which has thousands of developers, and this is just a random guy behind the screen trying to replicate it. So that's why we're just gonna have something set in stone, so that our stories will consist of medias only, right? So we'll say which is a string, and by default it doesn't matter, right? So basically what we're saying here is we'll add a background media, and if if they want to add a text, they can add a text, but then if they don't, they don't, right? So this is basically that. But then the most important thing is basically the timestamp, and within this timestamp, what then do we do? Is say type of date, and by default there will be the new date at which that current post is not post, but then the story is made, right? And then we want to export const story model is equals to model, right? And then that is, we can say story, right? And then we'll say to this thing story schema, bingo. So now let's come here to our controller where now all the fun happens, right? So now with that said, what then we do is, first things first, let's also connect to Mongoose within our server.ts. Let's use Mongoose to connect. So let's say import Mongoose, just to make sure that we connect to this thing Mongoose, but I really don't need to. It's just that I'm used to when I'm using MongoDB to connect, but then I believe that I really don't need to. Okay, now say Mongo URI is process say process.env.mongo URI. And then due to me using that, I need to access my environment variables, and .env will help me. Say that, and then say config, right? And then now with that said, I can now say connect, and then pass in the Mongo URI, which will return back a callback function. If there is an error, we'll check that error, and then return a console.error of that error. And then if there isn't, we'll now console.log server connected to MongoDB, right? So now that should do us, that should do us justice. Clean up the server, and then let's see. And then before we get to the fun part of working with cron jobs and everything, so now we should get our Mongo connection server connected to MongoDB. There we go, right? So now with that said, what then do you want to do is, now first things first, what we do is let's go back here. Now let's go to our controller where all the fun will happen, right? So here we have our cron job. So when it's like this, basically it will run every second, as we saw. But then if we change this, so this depends on you guys, but then if you change here, it will run basically every minute, every 10 minutes, every 40 minutes. But then I want this thing to run every second, because we want to make sure that we don't miss a beat, right? So now I'll run it like this, right? My cron job, right? But then for now, let's just keep it like that. There's really nothing much that we want to do here, right? So now let's first create this post, not post, but then this, what's this thing? Yeah, this story, like this story. So now what we do is, I can now come in here, and let's just do that, come back here, and then let's import. We'll be using formidable because we'll be getting media, and then we'll say formidable, come on, formidable, and we'll say incoming form, right? And then from there, what then we want to do is we'll create an interface as well for story, and then we'll have that create. And with that said, this create is request response, and I believe that should be void, right? Because we'll be dealing with formidable. And then let's also import request and the response interface. So request and the response, and then we'll say request, and we want the response, right? So now export class, which is story controller, and it implements story, right? So now we grab that create, which is basically our request and then now our response, that, and then we do that. So now first things first, obviously we need to run authenticate middleware so to get who this person is. So request the token, but then now this takes me back to changing this to being any, right? And then now we'll get the username is equals to token.username, right? And then we create a new formidable instance. Form is equals to new incoming form, and then we want to pass our request body, request errors if there is fields files, right? And because files will only be one file, story, then we'll handle that as any. Same reason with regards to when we were handling the profile, right? So now first things first, we will get the text that maybe a user might have, and then we have a background media. So that is basically how we're gonna be having this. We'll say background media, and then we'll destructure that from files, not fields, files, right? So those are the two things that we need. So now remember that middleware, not middleware, but then that utility function that we wrote, also coming to use, guys. We really not repeating ourselves, which is that file upload. If there's any media files, we want to upload those things. So we come here, and then we say comma. Why am I saying comma? And then say media URL is equals to file upload, and then we give it the background dot path, right? And then we come here, say const new story is equals to new story model, and then that should auto import, and then is that add required? Then I can just do that, go back there, right? And then now that should do us justice. And remember we said it's owner, and the owner is the username, and the media is the media URL. But then remember there's asynchronous, I have to await, and that is where now we have to async, just like that. And then now I need to add the text, and if the text is not there, it will give it a default of an empty string. So now what then I then do is try catch this thing so that I can save. But if there is any error, I return a response.status of 500.json, and then I throw in that error, right? And then we'll come in here and then try to save. So I'll say const saved story is equal to await, and then we'll say new story.save, and then if that works just fine, I return a response.status of 201.json, and then we'll say story created, and then also return the saved story, right? So now that should work just fine. Let's create the story, let's see if that works, and then we're not getting any problems. So now let's create our route, which is story.routes.ts. So now import from Express, we want to import router, and then we want to import the controller as well. Go there, controller, story.controller, right? We get that controller there, and then our const router is equals to router, and then we want to get that controller is equals to new story controller. Bingo. So now I can say router.post, and then /API/story, and then now we say to this thing request response, and then we dump that to the controller create, and then also throw the response. And then now let's expose this route. We'll say export default router, and then now we go to the server to now register that route. So now I can even remove this pool thing, really not necessary, and then import. Remember this is story route like that, because we're not exporting in a one-liner, hence we do that. So route story.route, and then now I can now come in here. Why is this thing give? Oh, it's a route with one S. right? So I can now just copy that, paste that, and then say story route. Right, so now that should be registered. Now let's create a new story. Let's see if that works out. So run my server so that if there is any error that arises, we have a clean terminal. So this is why I love a clean terminal, so that I can read my errors appropriately. Let's create a new request. And then, okay, it's not a long URL, so I can just HTTP localhost and then 5000 and /API/story. And then remembering that we need to run the middleware of authenticate to authenticate this person to get their token to know who this person is. Right. So we go up once, middlewares, authenticate middleware, and then authenticate. And then we run that authenticate middleware. Right. So now if I come back here, my server should run, right? And then let's come back and then let's get this token, because if I send this, we should get an error, not an error, but then that we should be authenticated. There we go. Sign up or login to continue. Now let's get a token. I believe I can get one on those things. Go to headers. There's none. Oh yeah, there it is. So I can get one. Yeah. So now I come back here to my headers and then say x-auth token and then pass in that token. And then now what I need to do is I need to get my text, let's say bingo. And then let's get my files and then add just that file, and then the name of the file, I'll just copy that because that is the expected name, field name, paste that there, and then let's send this. Hopefully this works. So let's see if we're not getting also any errors within our terminal. So as you can see, we get the story and we get the timestamp, right? And this is exactly what we get, right? So now this is where now cron job comes into play, right? What then does cron job do? What are we gonna do with this cron job, right? We now come here to our story controller, right? And then now within this cron job, I'll just write it down below, but then import it appropriately. Let's import it appropriately using ES6. I'll say import, and then we want to import cron. So we'll say import cron job from cron, and then we'll say to this thing, let's just go down here. We'll say const, and then cron is equal to cron job dot cron job, right? So that's what we're gonna be installing, not installing, but then the instance that we're using. And then we'll say to this thing, I don't want to use var, but then export, and then we export job. And then once we do this, we'll say new cron, and then what we know that this will run each and every second, right? So I'll just also adhere to ES6, remove that function keyword, and then run that like this, right? And then now what then we then do is let me just also kill the server. What then we then do is now we need to have our story model. We have that imported there, right? So now what we want to do is, let's just do this, remove this. So each and every second we want to find all the data within our story model. So we await, and then we say story model dot find, right? And that should be async, right? Each and every second, right? And then what then we then do is we'll say data want to loop through each and every document that is there, right? We say doc, and then it's IDX, right? And then after looping through each and every document that we get, right, what then do you want to do, right? You want to say const current date, the current date time is equal to new date, come on, new date, like that, right? And then I'll just run it as any because I didn't write any interfaces. So here, what do I mean by that is within the model, let's come in here, within the model here, in order for me to have this registered, I need to write an interface or for types for this, whereby this will be maybe a story type, whereby within the story type will be something like this. If this makes sense, I'll say story like that, right? And then have owner, which is the string, and we have media, which is also a string. I think it's equal to when we're dealing with types. Am I mistaken? I think it's like this: string, and then we have text, which is also a string, and then we have time stamp, which is date, just like that. That this needs strings like that. I don't know if this needed caps or what, but then I doubt, man. Right. So if I had something like this, and then here within, why am I getting errors now? See red squiggly line. Where is this? Why is this? That should be story equal to type is equal to that. Right, bingo. So now with that said, here this would be, as you can see, the type of story. So let's see if this doesn't give us any problem. So I would have been bound to enforce an any type here, but then let's see if that doesn't give us a problem. So now we want to calculate hours div. So we want to get the hours of this thing, and we say math dot absolute. And within the math dot absolute, what then we do is we'll say current datetime minus the doc timestamp, which we have. And as you can see, this is why I needed to enforce this any types, right? So we do that, and then I can just say this thing is any, so that we don't just avoid those things, right? So say any, and because we know that both of these things are date times, and then we'll minus by 36E5. And what then we do, because this thing basically will return back to us our hours, because you must remember that when we subtract the times, right, the date times will return back to us the difference between the dates in milliseconds, right? So this 36E5 is a scientific notation which we're using, right? And this will then convert everything from milliseconds to hours, right? So now once we do that, we have our hours. So if we say if hours, right, is greater than or equal to, because it might be possible that we miss the exact 24 hours, like directly. I don't know how they handle that after 24 hours directly, it nukes out. So but then if that's that document, its hours is greater than or equal to 24, we know that that 24 hours is met. So say story.find find and update, find by ID and update. So we're passing the ID, which is doc._ID, and that doc._ID is what we then pass, right? And then I'll say dot then. Once that thing is done, we'll say to this thing, once the delete is done, console.log story removed, right? And then here we then catch if there is an error, we'll then console.error, we paste in that error, right? So but then here I'm console logging, but then what could have been done here is since you know that it's a real-time application, Instagram is a real-time application, we could have triggered a socket, we could have emitted a socket message, a socket event, if I were to say properly, would trigger a socket event, which then now everything syncs up properly. If you guys want me to show that, that is something that we can do, right? So basically this thing will run each and every 20, not each and every second, this cron job will run. And then let's also console log so that you guys can see console log checking stories, right? Now let's check that, and then let's export this job. We already exported this job. So now we come in here to our server, our main entry point, and then go to controller and then story, right? So now what we want to use is this job, and then just right underneath this I can now say job.start. So now this should run each and every second. So now if I run dev, we should see checking story. As you can see, this checking story is checking each and every second. So run until it meets its conditions, and as you can see that we're not gonna wait 24 hours for this thing, but then this should work appropriately. So if you guys liked this video, please comment down below, share, subscribe, like, do all the things, guys. So this is basically what we have with regards to our Instagram backend clone. I really do appreciate interacting with you guys. So do check out this features, which is saving posts and following and unfollowing people. And I will definitely check your pull request, guys. And I'd really like it if you guys don't delete the ES lint, because it will help us to work in the same sort of like structure, right? So comment down below, like, comment, subscribe, and see you on the next video. Bye.